Here we'll talk about the types of different data. Like we have structured data and unstructured data. Structured data is something which we have been using for ages now. Something which is very structured and something which can be arranged in the form of rows and columns. And there can be a defined relationship between those data. At the same time, unstructured data is something where we do not have a defined structure, and those are actually unstructured data. The more we'll go into the details, we'll understand more in better way, right? There are another ways in which we can define a structured data and unstructured data, but uh, so storage and organization of data. The way we organize data in the form of a very defined and structured way, we organize the data in the form of rows and columns. So that is a structured where we cannot define a proper structure, where we cannot define a proper organization of the data. Those are actually unstructured. At the same time, if we talk about the storage of structured data is very easy, whereas the storage of unstructured data is not that easy compared to the structured data. Okay. Now, if I talk about the collection, access, modifications, operations on the data, then structured data has a very defined way of doing those collections, access, modifications, and those operational thing on the data, which is not the case with the unstructured. And that is why unstructured data has again different types, and each different types of unstructured data is treated in a different way altogether. So let's go into the detail, right? Structured data can be organized in rows and columns and are actually relational tables and are stored in a relational tables. So we have seen in the past, and we have also worked on different tables on data organized in the form of rows and columns. The simplest example on which everybody has worked is an Microsoft Excel file, where you can see that the data is in the cross tab format. There are rows, there are columns, and each cell actually represents a kind of data. Right? And if I talk about a more standard way of storing those relational data, then we have seen databases like Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata. So those are standard databases where we can store the data in the form of rows and columns. In structured data, the data is actually in the form of numbers, strings, or dates. Right? Now let's look at the data. Now let's look at the unstructured data. Here, the data is organized in the form of document. It can be in the form of document. It can be in the form of key value pairs. It can be in the form of white column and graph related data. So what are those unstructured data? So everywhere where whatever we are doing, it is actually getting tabbed. It is actually getting stored, saved in some of the other format. Like for example, social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So we are storing images, pics. We are actually passing images. We are transferring images and pics from one place to another, right? We are chatting here and there. So all those chats, all those pics, all those images, all those documents like PDF document, image documents. So everything is actually a data. The audio file and the video files. We also transfer the audio files and the video files. We create on the fly the audio files. We create on the fly our videos, and then we transfer it via WhatsApp or maybe Facebook to different persons, to different person community. Or so everything whatever we are doing right now is actually getting stored in the form of different forms of data which do not have any defined structure, which cannot be organized in a very defined format, like for example images, text, JSON file, audio, video, emails, chats, documents, PDF files, etc. So all these fall under the category of unstructured data, right? And they can be organized, but then for each organization they have a different type of database specifically for that organization, and they can be organized in the form of a document, key value pairs, white column, and graph. Now, let's come back to structured data. Structured data are actually transactional data, and they are actually conventional RDBMS system, which is relational database management systems, which we have already talked, like Oracle, SQL Server, Teradata. For unstructured data, it is huge in number. Just imagine the number of chats ongoing on the social media platforms, the clicks which we are doing on a website, all those click data, the surveys which are being online. So everything is actually data. So it's a huge number, and on a daily basis We cannot imagine the number of data which is getting produced on a daily basis. The velocity of production is very high, so it cannot be stored at one place the way we have been storing, or the way we store our transactional data in a very defined uh, categorized RDBMS system. That's not the case with unstructured data. So there comes the concept of a big data, where we have where we need actually huge space, and at the same time huge computation power is required. So there comes in the picture big data, cloud computing, and Hadoop, right? So it actually gives you access to distributed computing and distributed arrangement of the data on at different places, right? Whereas in structured data, it requires less storage. The computation power requirement is also less. If I talk about the unstructured data, there we require huge space, which is handled by big data. And right now, cloud computing gives you a lot feasibility and ease to handle the huge space at the same time, uh, handle the huge computational power required in the case of unstructured data. Structured data, SQL databases, and unstructured data, there are different types of data, and so there are different places in which they can be organized and stored. Like they are called NoSQL databases. Sometimes, somewhere it is called not only SQL, and there are different databases like document databases where the data are stored in the form of a document, and MongoDB is one of the database. White column database, Cassandra and HBase are the databases. Neo4j is one of the database which helps the data stored in the form of graph. Redis and DynamoDB are the databases which helps store the data in the key value pair.